Do you always shoot with a tripod? No matter what you're shooting, how you're shooting, how many camera bodies you've got, how many lenses you have with you, but the tripod is always there. Let's learn how we don't have to have a tripod with us all the time. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly when, which lenses to use it with, what shutter speed helps, and so on. Hey guys, I'm a fashion and a wildlife photographer from New York, and I am here to make photography easy. Alright guys, so let's talk about tripods, when we absolutely need them and when we don't need them at all. Tripods, it's a piece of metal that stays with us. It makes life really heavy and cumbersome. Do we need it all the time? I don't. But I also have always maintained on this channel that I determine my ISO, I determine my aperture prior to my shoot. My shutter speed is what determines whether I need a tripod or I don't. So before I go to the shoot, I say to myself, am I going to shoot it at this shutter speed? Will I need a tripod? I mean, that's a question I always ask. And if not, and my shutter speed is supporting it, then I don't take a tripod. Life becomes easy. So before we talk about shutter speeds, let's talk about the focal length. Because there are some focal lengths, no matter what your shutter speed, you will always need a tripod, right? So I made a huge mistake when I was in the Himalayas in India. I was shooting with a 800. Nikon had given me an 800 millimeter lens to shoot with. The tripod that I took with me, it supported it, but at the same time it wasn't as strong as I really wanted it to be. Anyway, not speaking about the durability of the tripod, but we're speaking about the lenses that have to have a tripod underneath them. 800, 600 is my go-to lens normally when I'm doing wildlife. For the most part, I always have a tripod with that. A 400 and at times even a 300. So these lenses I cannot get away with hand holding. 800, 600, 400, 300 possible, but I always use a tripod. So these are the lenses that you absolutely need to have a tripod, a sturdy, strong tripod, and especially if you're doing 600 and 800, then 600 and 800 need rock solid tripods. I have the Gitzo, I forget the number on it, but I have the Gitzo that holds a 600 really well. And 800, nah, it doesn't. For an 800, you need the old-fashioned heavyweight tripods. Those focal lens absolutely need a tripod. No questions, no matter what the shutter speed, no matter what it is, you must have it. There's another thing that determines whether I need a tripod or I don't need a tripod. Am I going into a location where the weather is absolutely going to be crazy? Hopefully, because we love that, don't we? If the weather is going to be crazy, no matter what lens you have, if the weather is crazy, you absolutely must have a tripod. I don't care if you're shooting with a 50 millimeter. It doesn't matter. Weather's crazy, winds are blowing hard. When I mean crazy weather, I mean blowing winds like storm. You must have a tripod with you, a rock steady tripod. Alright, let's speak about shutter speeds. The way I determine whether I need a tripod or I don't need a tripod based on the shutter speed is this. If I'm shooting below 800 of a second, I must have a tripod with me. If I'm shooting above an 800 of a second, if the focal length basically allows me to, then I will go without a tripod. So a 200, an 80 millimeter, a 50, a 35, 24, 20. These lenses don't require a tripod if the weather is good. If the weather is not good and it's going to blow crazy, then carry a tripod with you. For the most part, when I'm photographing my horses, I'm using a 200mm lens. The weather is pretty nice. In fact, it's amazing. It's warm. It's amazing. At that time, I don't have a tripod underneath my lens at all. I mean, I handhold it and that's that. So these are the tips I'm going to give you guys about hand holding. A long time ago in New York, photographers used to be super friendly to each other, right? So we used to meet in one studio or the other. We were friends and we would just talk to each other. We would give each other tips on how to better our skills. We would compare things, and then we would also go and play these games. And one of the game that we used to play was, let's see who has the sturdiest hands. And the way we played this game was, we would all stand in a line, we would choose a subject, and then we would start with 125th of a second. Everybody takes a photograph, and then we compare the photograph and see, hey, is the photograph sharp or not? The one who doesn't have a sharp image at 125th of a second dropped out. Then we dropped the shutter speed down to 60. And we did the same thing. The photographer who didn't have a sharp image at 60th of a second dropped out. Then we dropped it down to 30. So those days, I used to be able to hold my camera at 1/20th of a second, and the photographs used to be tack-sharp. These days, I'm going to say I am older, of course, or I should say I'm gotten younger, and the technology has gotten so much better that I am still able to take a photograph at 1/30th of a second holding a 200mm lens, and it's tack-sharp. So how did I do that? I used to hold my breath, take a photograph. I mean, these days I know that the spray and pray method is something that everybody does, but you can still hold your breath. Hold your breath, brace yourself, suck your core in, and then take a photograph. Photography is not all about equipment. It's also us, right? So hold your breath. If you don't have a tripod with you and you are holding a 200mm lens, hold your breath when you're pressing down the shutter speed. You will get sharper image. Suck your core in. Make that into a habit. Like at this point, I don't even think about it. Every time my finger presses the shutter button, my core is sucked in and my breath has been stopped totally, right? So if you practice these things, you may not need a tripod all the time. Tripod is a very tedious, heavy way of shooting. It's necessary. Many times it's absolutely necessary, but there are times that you can get away with it. Follow these tips and you will be able to shoot without a tripod. I've given you guys the tips in this video, of course. I've spoken to you about this. 200mm and below, you don't need a tripod if the weather is good. 800 of a second and below, you do need a tripod for sure. 800 and above, you don't need a tripod. And of course, your focal length matters. So anyway, guys, so I hope this all helps. Play with your photographer friends and try to do the sharpness game. You know, it's amazing. It brings the photographers together, and then you guys have something in common to speak about and tease each other as well, right? Who has the sturdiest hands? Anyway, I hope this was helpful. I know it's short, but tripod is not necessary. Not all the time. Speak to you guys later. Thank you so much.